Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast. If I could get you to introduce yourself and what your business is all about to start with.
All right. Well, my name is Amy Castro, and my company is actually called Triad Communication. But most of the time, when people reach out to me, they reach out because they've been given my name. So my web address is actually amycastro.com. Just seemed easier. People can find me. But what I basically do is I work with organizations of all different types to help them improve on their workplace communications. So I help leaders develop communication skills for interacting with their teams. I help teams develop their communication skills for interacting with each other and their customers, which is obviously super important. And then I'll come in also and deal with any kind of specific types of situations that they might be facing, like productivity issues or conflict. Conflict is obviously very common in our lives and it happens when humans interact. So I will help them with that. And assertiveness. I work with a lot of veterinary clients and working with them in being more assertive in their communication. They tend to be so compassionate and caring almost to their own detriment sometimes. And a lot of people who work with pets are like that.
Brilliant. How did you come to, how did this all come to be? Like, how did you come up with the idea of all of this?
Well, it was kind of an interesting thing. So I went to school. My undergraduate degree is in journalism, and then I went into the Air Force, and I used those skills, and I got a master's degree while I was there because that was something that was highly encouraged. And it just so happened that one of the local programs related to communication was in human communication theory. And once I started taking that, I was hooked because the way that we interact with others and how we communicate with them is the key to our success in every facet of our lives, I think. I mean, maybe I'm biased at this point after doing this for more than 20 years, but I had so many light bulb moments during that training, and I wanted to be able to take what I had learned and pass that on to other people because we don't get good communication training, I don't think, throughout our educations through our lives. Our parents or caregivers teach us to talk and they teach us to read and things like that. They tell us we should listen, but they don't necessarily tell us how. And then we tend to mirror what we see as far as how they interact with others. Are they um, aggressive? Are they assertive? Do they kind of take a back seat to things? And then we just follow in their footsteps. And that may not always suit us as um, in achieving our goals. And so, like I said, I think about communication as being a set of tools. You pull them out when you need them. You pull out the right one when you need them, and you're going to be more successful when you do. And I want to give people those tools to achieve whatever goals it is they're trying to accomplish.
That sounds amazing. I think it's a very key point as well. You're not really taught how to communicate, especially in a business sense, or like you're saying in the veterinarians, uh, talking with pet parents, especially as well, just to take away some of the lingo and just be very on ground level with them. Be like, this is what's going on with your pet. This is how it's affecting them, and this is how to solve it. It's something that's not necessarily going to be taught in, medical school or anything like that. So I
No,
think that's really key.
no,
It's
that's
so,
so true. I'm sorry.
oh, no, it's all right. It happens. It's so weird when you doing it on Zoom and then you're like, ah, and then you step over each other. But it's cool. This is why I edit.
There you go.
Well, so, I guess my next question for you is, what advice would you give those, looking to do a pet business, or maybe they're already in the pet business, especially alongside communication skills, stuff like that. What would you recommend without giving all the good away?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing it kind of starts with what are what is your life going to be like once you start that pet business? Because I find in working with people, I present every year at Global Pet Expo, which is this ginormous basically a pet industry trade show, and I have lots
Wow.
of pet professionals that come through my workshops, from veterinarians to groomers to people that own, you know, franchises for the pet business. And I think almost universally one of the biggest challenges that they face when they start a pet business is they didn't realize how much peopling they were going to have to do. And because it's like, oh, I love dogs and I want to groom dogs, or oh, I love animals and I want to help save their lives. And that's fantastic. And they like that part of it. But a lot of them would rather be bitten by a dog than deal with an angry customer. And so I think the amount of human interaction skill that they're going to need to be successful in that job is a little bit of a shock. And most of them don't go into it with that, like none of us do. And so therefore they're kind of stuck, and then they don't understand why certain scenarios play out, like why am I losing customers, why can't I attract more customers, why are my customers so angry with me all of the time, why do my customers come and then leave and never come back, where was the communication gap there, what caused it. And I realize communication, and I think we all probably realize that communication is definitely a two-way street. It doesn't always fall to that pet business owner to make the communication happen. But it's your business and your success is on the line. So getting those communication skills and having that toolbox built up is super important. I also think it ties into all facets of the business, not just the customer service. It ties into your hiring, how you train or not your employees, how your employees then interact with your customers, and it creates the whole culture of your business. So I think that's something, the advice that I would give is go into it with your eyes open. There's going to be lots of peopling. And number two, do whatever you can to build those people skills. Even if your whole point in starting that business is you don't want to work with people, you're going to have to. And so work on building those skills, because otherwise your life is going to be incredibly stressful every single day in that pet business.
Well, definitely as well. Even if you're just talking with employees and stuff like that, sometimes you just forget. It's like, there's a better way to be going about this, or, just even like the approach to a conversation, whether it be a difficult one, an easy one, it's always like complex. And this is where, learning these skills is really key, isn't it? Because it can even make or break a good day or a good deal or bringing on a new client.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just taught an all-day communication training for a large international company the other day, and I start so basic with, this is the cycle of human communication. This is how the process works. And I think people are always shocked that it is a process,
Mm.
and there's a lot of facets that feed into an interaction. It's not just, and like groomers, for example, get into a lot of issues. The pet parent will come in and they'll say, I want it, I want it, I want a really, really short cut, or I only want an inch taken off, or whatever. Even just simple things like an inch taken off, when in reality, the customer's idea of an inch is like a quarter inch or a millimeter. And when the person really takes an inch off, then the customer has a fit, because it's like, oh my gosh, what did you do? You cut all my dog's hair off. Ah. And, something as simple as literally busting out a ruler and saying, okay, so just to confirm, this is how much you want me to take off, or having some kind of a guide, or even just doing a gesture with your hands as a nonverbal communication to say, okay, so you want me to take this much off of the hair, or show them on the dog's hair. And it's such a, like, that's just one simple tiny piece of it. And there's so much more that can hang you up. And so it is really important to pay attention to that process and understand how to manage it. Because your customers aren't going to take the charge. And if we look at the way customers interact these days, they've become more and more challenging, I think. People are much more free to be rude, ugly, condescending, and just really have explosive acts of emotion, rather than just saying, I'm really upset that my dog's hair is cut shorter than I thought it was going to be. They, blow up and start screaming. And it's a real challenge to manage that when you're the business owner and you're trying your best to be professional, but the other person is not.
Well, definitely. And I think as well, in the nicest way possible, there's a lot of entitlement, or people think as well they're going to get free stuff if they kind of come at you with that attitude. Because a lot of people, you don't want to deal with the confrontation, which is absolutely fair enough because, that's very daunting. But also, you need to be able to hold your ground and be like, look, I'm sorry for the miscommunication, but doesn't mean you're just going to get the service for free. Like we did do the service for your dog, although there was a miscommunication, or maybe, the customer meant one thing when actually they meant another, and now they're all like got their panties in a twist, so to speak, and are going on about it. So it's definitely key as well, just to be able to be like to ground yourself and be able to learn those skills, be like, okay, well, we'll resolve this. But at the end of the day, would still need to pay the staff member that did this.
Right. Well, and those are scenarios that you have to think through I'm a big believer in your business and in life in general. You play the what if game. What
Mm,
if this happens? What if that happens? What if what if they're really angry about this? What if there's some type of miscommunication? Because once it happens and you're in the heat of that moment and you're feeling maybe under attack, your best communication skills are not going to come as easily if you have not thought about where they might be and what they are. And so doing things like not necessarily scripting, but having response to common complaints, having responses to common questions, getting all of your employees on the same page so that when they respond, they're giving kind of the same, not robotic, verbatim the same answer, but basically the same answer and exactly what you said, knowing when you're going to stick to your guns and knowing when you're going to have a little wiggle room in maybe your policies or your procedures depending upon the situation. But it's better to have thought that through in advance than to try to do it right when you're standing in front of the customer because the ideas and the words will not come to you when you're under duress.
oh, definitely. So, moving on to the second portion of the podcast. From what I can tell, you've got an immense experience on fostering animals, and I'd love to pick your brains a little bit more about this. Now, obviously, to anyone listening who might be considering doing this or fostering kittens, or, helping those who need a temporary home before they go to their forever home, what tips do you have for those thinking of fostering?
That's a great question. Yeah, I stopped counting at 3,000. I used to keep a list of every single foster that I had, and I now run a rescue and have for the past couple of years. So I'm not just some crazy lady with 3,000 cats in her house or something like that. But I mean, I have personally had hundreds and hundreds of animals come through my home and through my property. So what I would say the first bit of advice would be really get to know the organization that you plan to foster with before you start fostering. Everything from what is their reputation in the community to the more nuts and bolts of what kind of training do they provide? What kind of insurance are you covered under? Should you be injured by one of their animals? What do they provide? I actually had a foster recently that is with our rescue, and she really likes to do mamas and little baby kittens. Well, we didn't have any, and so I said, hey, reach out to this colleague of mine. She's got mamas and babies. And it didn't work out well because she has certain expectations that when when she's fostering for me, I provide everything. If you say, I want this kind of a ball for my kittens, I will bring it to your house tomorrow or I'll have it on your porch from Amazon or Chewy or wherever. But we have the luxury of that financially because we have a pretty good budget and we manage it well. Not to say that the other person doesn't manage their money well, but their expectation is that when you're a volunteer that you're going to provide the food and the litter and the items for your pet. And that's fine. Just know what you're getting into in the first place. That also extends to understanding the animal that you're taking on would be another huge tip. Like, what is this animal's condition? And they may not have tons of information, especially if it's a brand new animal and you've got a rescue that's foster based. That means they don't have a facility that it could have come in and stay for a week or two while people get to know it and check out its health. It might come almost straight to you. And those are two different scenarios that you would want to be aware of as to where is this animal coming from, what potential illnesses, behavior issues, or whatever that you might be facing. I mean, there's so many things. Knowing how to keep your own personal pet safe from an animal that might be coming in that's unvaccinated or that could potentially have behavior issues. And then the last big one that I would say would be knowing what the expectation is beyond the financial, of how long you're going to care for that animal, because that's another thing that has a tendency to occur is people will say, oh sure, I'd love to foster this puppy, and now it's coming up on a holiday and I've got a month-long trip to Europe or someplace planned, and now I want to give the animal back. Well, not every facility has the ability to take it back either at a moment's notice or even a week from now. So know what is your commitment and what would happen if you needed to return the animal to the organization. So those are all important questions that you'd want to ask before you start fostering, for sure, just to know what you're getting yourself into.
Well, definitely. I think another thing as well is maybe to prepare for possible disaster or problems. So, saying that they can come in, there might be behavioral issues. You have no clue, it might be a blank slate. So being able to be prepared for those issues, like, if they are going to be quite volatile, to have like a separate room that they can have their safe space in, have like, um calming sprays, or even just, being able to provide a different environment until they can be kind of welcomed into the household, I think is really key as well. Because, obviously the last thing you want is that you're, fostering maybe a cat that's come off the streets or something, but then they accident, they get volatile, which, fair enough to the animal, and
Yeah.
attacks one of your own cats. And then you've got also now a vet bill and everything else. So being prepared for worst case scenarios, I think, is something that people forget about as well. Like things can go wrong. It's not going to be smooth sailing. Like, oh, I'm going to have this kitten for a couple of weeks and then be able to give it away to the new owner. Like it's not always going to be as clean cut and as movie like as some places kind of make it feel.
That is such a good point. Yeah, I mean, I can't say that long term that I have ever kept all of my fosters separate, but I always start them separately until I get to know them, until I've had a certain quarantine health period go by. And
Mm,
then, I have behavior training, so I know how to properly introduce animals to other animals, but things don't necessarily always go well. So you've got to be prepared for what you're getting yourself into. As a matter of fact, the very first cat that I fostered way back, gosh, it was probably 2010. I mean, 14 or so years ago. I brought home this mother and kittens. She seemed sweet and calm in her thing. She had three little kittens, so cute. And I thought, okay, I'm going to set her up in a spare bathroom. So I set the bathroom up. I put the litter box and the food and water, quiet part of the house. I opened the carrier door, and that mama cat came out, and she flew and bounced off the walls like a pinball game. I mean, she went ballistic, and it was terrifying. And all I could do was quickly back out the door. And she just, and it turned out she wasn't a wild cat, but she definitely had spent her life outdoors. And this was completely new. So she went from the shelter to to it stuffed in a carrier, and then riding in my car, and then boom, let her loose. And I probably would have been better off like just putting her inside the door, opening the door a little bit, not even all the way, and then just backing out and gotten out of there and let her slowly come out at her own pace versus like kind of, hey, come on out. So
mm,
you definitely learn a lot of things, and those are all great questions to ask. And if your organization that you're fostering for cannot either answer those questions that you have, or doesn't have time, like figure it out sometimes, because sometimes you'll get that, then that's probably not the organization that you want to volunteer with, because it's a pretty big commitment, and you're putting yourself potentially, and your pets and your home, because sometimes animals do damage, at risk. So you want to just be as aware as you possibly can. But definitely great advice to isolate that animal and the smallest space you possibly can to start off with, especially for cats.
no, definitely. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the advice you've already given in this episode?
Specific to the fostering, or just in general
I
with.
think I think in general, if you've got some for the first topic or the second topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I would say that when it comes to like fostering and pet businesses, I would love to see organizations do a better job of working together in those instances. I think that you can have a very mutually beneficial relationship between a pet business, whether it's a groomer or a pet shop or whatever it might be, and your local area rescues or shelters. I think one of the most important things, though, just like everything else, the communication that happens before, what are the expectations, things like that, so that that pet business owner knows what the rescue hopes to get from the relationship, and vice versa. And I think having those conversations in advance, and I have a lot of information on that if anybody ever wants to reach out to me. I actually do a training program. I did it last year at Global Pet Expo on working relationships between rescues and your pet business. But have those conversations in advance about expectations, everything from who's going to scoop the litter boxes in the store to how often are we doing events, who's going to be doing social media, things like that. And then I think having a contract. I think contracts are very important, and agreements are very important to your pet business and to rescue. So, like for us, for our rescue, as an example, there's the adoption application, which we use to screen and match adopters. But then there's always a contract. Like, this is the expectation, the legal expectation long term of how you're going to care for that animal, what you're going to do if you can't keep that animal, things like that. I have a contract with the store where our animals are shown that says who does what and who's responsible for what when it comes to the care of the animals in the store. And I think that it's not a bad idea for pet business owners to have agreements with their clientele. What I see a lot with pet business owners is they will tell people these are our policies, or they'll have those kind of sarcastic signs that kind of imply what the rules are. But I think in starting that relationship with somebody, whether it's an employee or a customer, to have these are the expectations that I have of my customers. It could be something as simple as, how far in advance are you expected to cancel an appointment and not get charged a fee, things like that. And then I think also included is, what am I also promising to provide as part of this agreement to you? What's my commitment or my promise to you? So that would be another thing I think would be definitely things to consider, because it's very hard when something goes awry. Like, I tell this to employers, pet business owners, all the time, and even in the rescue with our volunteers. You If you want to hold somebody accountable for not doing something, or not doing something to a certain standard, you have to be able to show them this is what it is. Like, even something as simple as being to work on time. You might tell your employees, yes, we're open from 8 to 4. Does that mean they get there at 8? Or does that mean that they get there at 7:50, 7:45, 7:30? It needs to be written down, because if you can't tell them they're late if there was no expectation of what on time was. So even just something as simple as that is, having contracts, policies, procedures written down. I know it's boring. I know it's not fun to document all that stuff, but it is really critical to success and communication.
I know, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience. It's been really great to gain a different insight into the world of pet business.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little information. You can learn from my from my experiences, so you can get things off to a good start and keep things going successfully for you.